Seated and ready and waiting. My name is Charles Metcalfe. I'm going to have the pleasure of chairing this evening's event. Now, you've all been given, I think, these question sheets. Now, I can't say that we're offering prizes for correct answers, but just to sort of interest yourself, just have a little think about what you think the answers might be and jot them down. And Mike Hill will be giving you the correct answers before we have our break. The format of the evening is that we're going to have two speakers before the break, and that's going to go on for about 45 minutes. Then we'll have a 30-minute interval, and then an hour of questions with Mike Hill. I'm going to introduce this first speaker now. He's Dr. Frank Rugman, and he's one of the co-authors of the 2015 Medact report on health and fracking. He's former visiting research fellow at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and also physician assessor for the NHS hospitals' preventable incidents, as well as many other things. Dr. Frank Rugman.
Good evening. I would like to thank the committee for inviting me to make a statement which I hope may illuminate some of the possible negative health impacts of fracking. My own perspective is that of a recently retired medical consultant. I am not a public health specialist, but I have consulted with the president of the UK Faculty of Public Health. My opinion must not be relied upon as an official account. I would simply encourage everyone to do your own research and to look at the facts. As you wonder why more states, countries and institutions advise or enact bans or moratoria on fracking, including belatedly the Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. It is important to understand that the industry uses the term fracking to describe only the hydraulic fracturing stage. However, the general public may consider fracking to include all the stages of the shale gas process: HGV traffic, pad construction, drilling, chemical mixing, well injection, hydraulic fracturing, flowback, etc. The industry may take advantage of that discrepancy and say things like, fracking doesn't cause pollution. But if you're a nearby resident, you don't care which particular stage pollutes. So when I describe the adverse health effects from fracking, I mean from the whole industrial process. After Malta, England is now the most densely populated country in Europe. The Fylde has a population density of 461 persons per square kilometre, about 4 times that of rural Pennsylvania, with its vast tracts of open land, which is promoted by the industry as a shining exemplar for fracking. However, in contrast to rural Pennsylvania, within 5 miles from the Little Plumpton site, there live about 1/5 of a million people, and about 4,500 residents live within 2 miles. At Wheaton, St Michael's Primary School is only 1 mile directly downwind from any fugitive gas or diesel exhaust emissions. Mr. Hill will indicate the projected scale of industry which may be required for the profitable exploitation of our countryside. But is there an intention to convert the Fylde into the largest producing gas field in Western Europe? Many in Lancashire wonder whether the government would ever impose such a so-called sacrifice zone on the south of England. If this is the future for the filed, then there will be reasonable concern that the cumulative effects of this industrialisation in all its stages, with intensive levels of fracking and thousands of HGV return journeys to multiple pad sites, may have some adverse impact on our population. For example, US census data shows that in some places, since commencement of fracking, road traffic fatalities had quadrupled. Chemical toxins may enter the human body through respiration, absorption through the skin, or ingestion. But we have no choice in the air we breathe. There is mounting evidence of the cumulative lethal impact of invisible air pollutants, particularly diesel exhaust microparticles, which at present contribute to 40,000 extra deaths per year in the UK. At equivalent fuel to energy ratio, diesel exhaust generates microparticulate matter at markedly greater rate than petrol. Diesel exhaust causes lung cancer. Mr. Hill will explain whether the shale gas process will require numerous diesel compressors. If so, perhaps we may expect an increase in diesel exhaust. Will these emissions be monitored and effectively regulated? The control of diesel exhaust emissions from the HGV lorries is also of concern. Fine carbon microparticles, PM2.5 or smaller, penetrate deep into lungs and directly into the circulation and may cause arterial disease, heart attacks and strokes, as well as lung cancer. Patients with asthma and respiratory diseases will be susceptible. Children particularly so, because diesel exhaust emissions may impair lung growth and development. Maryland is the latest US state, after New York State and Vermont, to ban fracking, in part thanks to the work of the Physicians for Social Responsibility, who cite some worrying research from the distinguished Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. Analysis of the records of more than 35,000 asthma patients aged from 5 years to 90 years old indicated a possible association between closeness to active fracking and exacerbations of asthma. Analysis of data from about 10,000 birth records indicated a possible association between closeness of the mother to active fracking and high-risk pregnancies and premature births. Analysis of more than 7,000 responses to questionnaires from adult primary care patients indicated a possible association between closeness to active fracking and migraine headaches, chronic rhinosinusitis, and fatigue. However, for all the above studies, further research is necessary on chemical, microparticulate, and stress exposure measurements and response, required to determine whether any of these associations are causal. The Pennsylvania Medical Society passed a formal resolution calling for a moratorium on fracking. This paragraph speaks volumes. Whereas many individuals and families have had nosebleeds, dermatological, respiratory, neurological, and gastrointestinal symptoms, and the industry has denied any wrongdoing, but has forced non-disclosure agreements in exchange for fresh water and money. Some have referred to this constellation of symptoms as the so-called shale gas syndrome. Pennsylvania researchers have also reported a possible increase in hospital admissions for conditions such as heart problems and strokes in 2 counties with active fracking, compared to a controlling neighbourhood county where the industry had been banned. The American Medical Association is also concerned about possible long-term health impacts. Fracking may be associated with the emission of volatile organic chemicals, such as benzene, or may release radioactive radon gas. Benzene-induced leukemia or radon-induced lung cancer may take years to develop, and the link to fracking may be difficult to establish. Silica sand used in fracking releases respirable dust, which may cause silicosis and cancer in the lungs of workers. Residents living very close to fracking may also be at risk. At Little Plumpton, unfortunate residents just 350 metres from the site may also be subjected to nighttime noise at 42 decibels. Sleep disturbance, particularly in vulnerable residents, can aggravate cardiovascular and arterial disease, impair cognitive function, and impair learning in children. Despite industry claims of safety and better regulation, reports of air or water pollution and negative health impacts continue to accumulate in the United States. Last year, the United States Department of Health reported analyses of groundwater near fracking sites and found toxins, including arsenic and lead, in quantities high enough to pose health risks. The Environmental Protection Agency finally admitted that there is a connection between the shale gas industry and contaminated groundwater. A further study found toxic groundwater up to 1 kilometre from a fracking well. The Public Health England report on fracking is out of date. Their conclusion that fracking was low risk has been described as a leap of faith, unsubstantiated by the scientific evidence. The assumption that all reported health risks from fracking could simply be overcome by regulation and engineering has also been widely disbelieved. Exposure to harmful volatile organic chemicals from fracking cannot always be eliminated through regulation, as there are technological and economic limitations to the treatment of emissions into the air, into groundwater, and from waste. The government claims that so-called gold standard UK regulations will effectively, they say, eliminate all the risks associated with fracking. But the reality is that in England there is not even a regulation for a minimum distance between fracking sites and homes. This ignores evidence that geographical distance is a major variable in the impact on the health of residents. The evidence base for robust regulation and good industrial practice is currently absent. In the UK, it is also likely that agencies may lack the staffing and resources necessary to monitor and enforce regulation. Moreover, the latest draft of the government plan for monitoring and improving air quality in the UK makes no mention of the control of microparticulates, which pose the greatest threat to human health. The President of the UK Faculty of Public Health has responded to the government decision to proceed with fracking at Little Plumpton and stated, "The regulatory system for fracking is incomplete and weak. The faculty calls on the government to reverse this decision. The faculty endorses the findings of a Medact report that calls for an immediate moratorium on fracking due to the possible serious public health risks involved, which include potential health hazards associated with air pollution and water contamination. These include toxins that are linked to increased risks of cancer, birth defects, and lung disease." Professor Middleton concluded, "The precise level of risks to human health from fracking cannot be calculated. Intensive levels of fracking activity could pose additional risks in the UK when compared to experience elsewhere because of the proximity and size of surrounding populations." Finally, I worked for years in the world of clinical trials. If the risks outweighed the benefits, then the Ethics Committee would not allow a trial to proceed. For filed residents, the questions are simple. Do you trust this industry with its vested interests? Then, do you trust the government to regulate the industry? In conclusion, then, perhaps we should consider the advice of Cicero, the orator and consul of ancient Rome, whose words are on the coat of arms of Lytham St Anne's. Salus populi suprema lex. The safety of the people is the highest law. Thank you so much for listening.
So thank you very much, Dr. Frank Rugman. Our next speaker is someone who some of you may be familiar with, Mr. Mike Hill. He's an engineer with many years in the oil and gas industry. He's worked with government, with industry, councils, NGOs, and residents groups to inform the fracking debate. Mike was an original contributor to the joint Royal Society and Royal Academy of Engineering shale gas report, which was used by the government to regulate fracking. And he's written numerous peer-reviewed papers and notes, including being one of the co-authors of the 2015 Medact report. Mike is currently an expert advisor on 2 technical working groups under the Joint Research Council of the EU Commission, while we're still there. He's just, good, I think you're there, Mike. He's just got to change the PowerPoint presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Hill.